Go back to who I talked about. The guy in California is selling. He's got a
Yeah.
$500,000 house. He's got an IRA. He's got a 401k plan. We've only got a minute left in this segment, so let's start a new segment, okay? I'm talking to Dan Walkow, cbankcapital.com, 866-541-9952. And I'm going to tell you, the world, that Dan Walkow is the guy to deal with if you've got a U.S.-Canadian investment situation. Challenge, an opportunity, because he can deal with your RSP, your U.S. IRA, your Canadian pension plan, your locked-in RSP, your RESP, and your 401k. Do you do 401bs?
Yes.
Okay. Your 401bs as well at the same time. And there's only 4 or 5 people in Canada that can do that. A couple of them at Dan's place. We got a guy who's been laid off from his job working in California.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to sell his house, and this guy's lucky because he's actually got $500,000 coming from his house.
Yeah.
He's coming back to Canada with a 401k, a IRA, and a separation allowance. What can you do for that guy?
Well, basically, if he contacts us before he comes across the border, the first thing we can do is we can assess what he's got.
Yep.
From a tax point of view, where his liabilities
So
lie.
far better to do it before he leaves and before he does, and while all this thing's still in place. Yep.
So once he engages our services, we'll look at his U.S. situation. We'll take control. Well, no, we'll custodialize his U.S. dollar assets, or if he has Canadian plans from a long while ago. We'll pre-prep the accounts and so forth to make sure they're, realize capital gains in the U.S. side before they move across, and all kinds of stuff on the preparatory side. If we will, when he's ready to move, we'll either do a couple of things on the say he's got the 500,000 and he wants to get it in. He thinks Canadian dollar is going to go up, so we can move the currency. We can set up a Canadian dollar account for him in Canada. So a recipient account on the Canadian side. We can move the money from the United States to his banking institution or an account that we custodialize in the States. Very cost effectively convert the money at wholesale, put it into his Canadian side account, invest it in Canadian dollar assets, whether it's short-term money if he's going to need the money within a year, or start on a Canadian investment program if he's looking, for example, to retire in Canada and says, this 500,000, I'm going to buy a place in Vernon, British Columbia, and I want you to design an income portfolio because I'm retired. In addition to my normal pension and so forth, I want an extra 30,000 a year in income. Design it and manage it for me. Okay, so we do that. In the meantime, he's got a 401k with the company he worked with, and chances are an IRA. We'll take and consolidate, whether it's his 401ks into his IRAs, get it all tidied up. We'll keep it in the United States, and when he becomes a resident of Canada, we'll manage his IRA in the United States. He's entitled to all the same benefits and so forth, as he would.
And you can do this
and we can
as a Canadian broker looking after his U.S. account.
Not a broker.
Canadian money market.
Money manager.
Money manager.
The difference. So we can take care of the process to get him started in the United States, the preparatory stuff to emigrate back into Canada. We can set up in the Canadian side before he moves. We can time the currency transaction. So, for example, we can, in that kind of a size, perhaps more, we have the ability to lock in future rates. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about the currency move.
Can you lock them in, for 60, 90 days?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we can time it. We also have a fair degree of expertise in the currency markets, in that we're active in, both currency markets all the time. So we do have some sense of.
Well, it's fair to say that every day you do with
we're
US
dealing with
Canadian
U.S. dollar
stuff.
every day.
Okay. Every day.
So, maybe more importantly on the other side, David, in terms of taking this whole situation and putting it around the other way, Canadian person decides to move to the United States for whatever reason. Maybe it's somebody who decides to take advantage of this cheap real estate in Sarasota or
Cape
Tampa or Cape Coral or whatever, and says,
Las Vegas.
That's enough.
Vegas
that's enough of the rain in Vancouver. I'm selling my shack in West Vancouver. I'm going to pick up my $2 million.
But they've got to be a U.S. citizen to do that, and they if you've been a U.S. citizen living in Canada for 40 years, and you never put into, even if you have the legal right to move to the States, you can't afford to do because of medical insurance.
Right, but what I'm saying is, for example, he's going to do this 6-month thing. Right?
Okay.
He says he's the best of both worlds. I'm going to live in West Van, this gorgeous Vancouver in the summertime, 6 months, and sail my sailboat. But you know what? I like boating, so I'm going to go down to wherever.
Fellow I had lunch with today is 67 years old, lived in West Vancouver, and he's got a big boat. Yep.
So he's going to have one in Florida too.
Yep.
And he says, I'm going to move $1 million down to Florida. I'm going to buy another boat. I'm going to moor it down there. I'm going to have
if you buy a place at Cape Coral, there's more canals there and backyard things, so we can put a 75-foot boat behind the house.
So you got to move $1 million down there. So we got a couple of things going on. Never been down there before, right? So chances are he'd want to have somebody like us because we take the Canadian dollar assets. He wants to buy a property. Well, he doesn't have a credit record in the United States. So we move the money. He goes down to the United States. We set up accounts for him in the United States. We help him establish a credited entity, facilitate and helping him buying the property. Chances are he's going to want to have some U.S. dollar assets. Say this fellow's quite wealthy. He says, you know what? I want to keep a couple of $1 million in U.S. dollar assets to fund my expenditures in the United States.
Okay.
When I got enough in Canada, let's leave that there. So he says, keep building a portfolio in the United States, and put so much cash into my the SunTrust bank account every month. You take care of it, right? And by the way, my son and daughter are now in the United States, and they're part of my estate. And I want some help in the estate planning side of things because they're U.S. residents or maybe cits, right? So we can facilitate the transfer, saving money on the conversion, handle the accounts on the U.S. side, handle the accounts on the Canadian side.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Because you're licensed in both countries.
Right. We can give him online access where doesn't matter whether he's in Florida or in West Vancouver. Mm-hmm. He's got the same access.
What if he takes a trip over to the Bahamas for the day?
No problem.
Can deal with it from the Bahamas too. Okay.
Right. We'll deal with most countries in the world, except worth talking about. We'll deal and accept business in most non-terrorism designated countries around the world. I mean,
so Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, France.
It depends. We never would solicit business in those jurisdictions, but if somebody approaches us, one of the issues we can't solicit because we're not licensed to do business in, say, GB or whatever. But if somebody comes and approaches us and says, we're thinking of moving in a couple of years, we want to establish a Canadian connection.
So that makes sense.
Can you get us started? Why would somebody choose us from afar and not knowing us?
Because you're used to dealing with cross-border and multi-country issues.
That's one of the reasons. But one of the other reasons that I think may have some bearing when choosing a professional from afar, how do you know they're good guys?
Well, I recommended you.
But one of the things I guess I'd like to say is that with us, the difference is, for example, in establishing a relationship is that we're totally fee-based.
Yes.
Right? So we charge a flat fee for service. There's no incentive to sell something, there's no hidden fees. We can't charge or accept any
Wash trading with you doesn't do you any good. It just causes you more time and trouble and effort.
Nothing, right? So when you hire us, it's a flat fee basis. You know what's going to cost you. And our rates are very, as you know, very
competitive with the market.
Competitive and perhaps super competitive, I would say. I guess, as you know, when you hire a professional, one of the first things is, well, how are you paid? Mm-hmm. That kind of tells a story, right? So, but we're prepared to talk to pretty much anybody who has a relationship with a Canadian investment manager.
Is there any state in the States that you can't deal with, for instance?
A couple.
Give me an example.
Partially it's to do with our custodial relationships.
Okay.
But yes, as far as domestic's concerned, and it gets complicated because of the dual jurisdictional issues, but for example, if you're a domestic resident in the United States and you want a U.S. account, say you want an IRA or an American trading account, or we want us to manage an American portfolio, all states.
Okay.
Because we host it in the United States and we manage it in the United States, period, end of story.
So you can do that in all states.
Right.
Okay.
But, for example, one of the complicating issues is when it comes to Canadian retirement accounts. because not all states are signatories to the NAFTA treaty.
That's true.
So in some cases, we work in partnership with custodians. So we don't physically hold the assets of clients, David. We work with major trust companies.
Another trust company or custodian holds it, you manage it.
Right.
You give the case. We got to take just a second here, and we're going to come back to this.